And we're live.
Whoop, whoop, whoop.
9 o'clock.
Back.
9 o'clock on a Monday.
It's not a Monday.
Oh, yes.
It's a Wednesday.
It's even worse.
Well, it depends which way you're looking at it. I think we're closer to the weekend.
You could glass half empty, glass half full.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. Wednesdays, we had some scheduling stuff, but yeah, Wednesdays. This is probably the height of the stress for the week for me. I don't know about you. Are you?
Oh man, this is when you're working in the music industry, it's probably true of a lot of industries, but like Q4, that's where it all kicks off. It's just such a busy time with like everything. Like for a lot of companies, their fiscal year is structured so that they hit it ends at the end of the calendar year. So everything's just ramped up. But I also think it's like the summer's over. People are back to work. They're trying to line up things for like next year. There's a lot of deals coming in, and it's coming up to Christmas. It's just a busy time.
Well, from a release standpoint, I think it kind of dies down. At least in December, like they try to cram everything in November because nobody wants to release music around the holidays. Yeah, like October, like more October, and then like November, December. There's less music being released. But
yeah, that's true. It's like no one wants to compete with all that Christmas noise and
everyone's sort of
Carey takes over the airwaves.
Exactly. Yeah, everyone's sort of getting ready for Grammy season. Like just little things that it's like they're cramming everything in, and then it just slowly dies down, and then people stop answering their emails. Then you have the overachievers who are in the office on like the 23rd of December, and it's like okay, man.
Hey, that's the good thing about the music industry. It kind of like shuts down over that holiday period, between Christmas and New Year. And I'll be off to London. Well, actually, that'll be in the first part, like mid-December, going back to London for a visit. Did that last year. Yeah. Well, it was the first time back in 2 years because of the pandemic and the travel restrictions, etc. So that was nice to get back doing the same thing this year. Going to see all my friends, catch up with people, and then I'll get like home for Christmas. But it's good to get a break over that period, and like that like there's actually nothing going on. Yeah, and I mean there are those brave souls that still want to compete with Mariah Carey on Christmas and release some cover album, and shout out to them. Yeah. Hopefully those releases go well. No, this is actually like an interesting little anecdote. Yeah. Okay. Like in the UK, which is where I lived for the most of my life, the number one Christmas song is not Mariah Carey.
Whoa. Okay. A Record Shepherd's exclusive. Whoa.
And I assumed, right, that when I came over to New York City, the number one Christmas song, and I'll tell you what it is in a second, I thought, for sure, it will 100% be the number one Christmas song, if not in America, certainly in New York. And only to find out that New Yorkers have never even heard of this song.
Wow.
And the big sort of wow factor, if you think that's not strange enough, is the title of the song is Fairy Tale of New York by the Pogues, right? And this is one of the best Christmas songs you've ever heard. It's like it ends every single night to the around Christmas season. You go out in the bars back in like the UK. Yeah, without a doubt, this is the last song that is played. Like,
give us a rendition. How's it go?
It was Christmas. No, not but
when was it written? When was it written? Like it's like
it must have been. It's a good question. The Pogues must have been in like would it be the 80s? Like and it's an absolute classic. Like you get like every Christmas song, it gets played to death. But even with it being played to death, I still love it. Love it.
But my first time, just like in consciousness, hearing the Mariah Carey song was from Love Actually, which is a British film.
That was you're showing your youth.
Yeah. Yeah, I know it's been around way before that, but I thought, is that not a popular film?
Oh no, it's.
But nobody's like
Mariah. The point is, Mariah Carey's song is the most popular Christmas song. Yeah, like it's very, very popular, and it is very popular in the UK. But the point that I'm trying to make is, even as popular as it is, it's not the number one. the number one, like, I mean, in terms of like, there's all these like, what do you call them, like votes or whatever every year. Like, well, what's the nation's favorite Christmas song? It's Fairy Tale of New York.
Oh, so you're just talking about it in terms of favorite songs, but not.
I think it's probably
performs the better.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm getting into
thin what are your state facts?
But listen, the fact is, it's hugely popular. It ends every night more or less, and it's up there. I think it surpasses Mariah Carey back home, and people have never even heard of it here.
Yeah,
Fairy Tale of New York. Check it out.
Well, we love Mariah Carey. Shout out to Mariah Carey.
Yeah,
I can't wait to hear your song over and over and over again for the next 2 months.
Yeah,
and you can use all that money to pay for Nick Cannon's commune.
So, but anyway, that's Christmas Q4. It's all starting to kick off already. We just had Halloween, and
I saw your pictures. You look good.
Thank you. I've not seen your outfit yet, so you have to with pictures of that.
No, it came so fast. I just I didn't think about it. You know, we hosted a party, which was nice. But I really just went to the 99-cent store and bought like a unicorn horn, and and it had a little tail. But I've never been one to dress up for Halloween. It's just maybe I'm a little too cool for school, but I'd rather just get drunk and think about that. But you could do both. So
you can do both. But no, I
what did you go as?
Well, it's been so busy that it was the first time in years I've got to Saturday, and I was like, I literally haven't thought of anything. And normally I do give it a little bit of thought that week, and I'll go out and go into town and I'll brave like the Halloween stores and stuff to put an outfit together. But this year, none of that. And I thought, do you know what? I'm going to sack it off. I'm not going to do it at all. And then at the last minute, I got a burst of energy, and I was like, nah, of course I'm going to do it. Halloween was actually my first weekend in New York when I moved here.
Oh, okay.
So it's sort of significant that that's sort of like a good time, and I got to kind of mark it. So luckily for me, I keep all my costumes, I keep all my outfits, and I have a big sort of bin that I can just recycle stuff out of. So I went this I'd done it before, to be honest with you, but it was like an evil magician. Kind of Clockwork Orange for vibes, like steampunk, that sort of thing. But it was fun. We got dressed up and went into the city, and I mean, it's a good time. Yeah,
I think this is honestly a good merch idea, because there was that meme, like the Halloween meme costume that sort of went viral of a pack that was a Halloween costume, and you could just
everyone was posting that.
And it was funny because what a complaining employee starter kit, Halloween costume. But as an artist, you could control your own Halloween costume. So if people are making fun of an outfit you wore, you could make that costume and then sell it for Halloween.
See, that's not a bad idea.
Yeah, and then put a little QR code, sell your album,
Yeah.
Yeah.
You could do that with bundle it with pre-orders for any Halloween releases.
Yeah.
That's not a bad idea. I should be working in the marketing department.
Yeah. Oh.
Maybe not.
Yeah. Maybe I should have kept that one in myself.
But anyway, well, before we get into what we're going to talk about today, I think in fact, we might as well let you know, since you're not kept in suspense. We are going to get on to talk about what do we call it? The content overload.
Content overload.
Yeah.
Stream bubble burst.
The streaming bubble getting so inflated that it bursts.
Or is it?
Or is it? And we'll go on to talk about that, because it's been in the news a little bit. There's some talk from Lucian Grainge, the chairman of Universal Music, and
the big guy.
The top dog, talking a little bit about that. But before we get on to that, any good shows that you've been to?
Yes, I was I've been on a bit of a binge this week, and I'm just gonna let myself do it.
Let your hair down.
Yeah, exactly. But I went to Bowery Electric. It was actually my first time seeing a show there.
That's good.
Which is weird because I've lived in New York for years, but it's a good venue. And I saw a good friend of mine, Floyd Fuji. Shout out to Floyd Fuji, an incredible artist. Um, yeah, it's rare to have a guitar or an artist who's an amazing vocalist, amazing stage presence, and is virtuosic at the guitar. You know, so not only can they sing and play, but you know, during breaks he's doing solos, he's riffing. It's, you know, it's very like Prince, D'Angelo. You know,
it's funny you should say that. That's the first person that comes into my head whenever I think about, like, you know, a virtuoso in more than one instrument or voice.
Yeah, and it's awesome to just see an artist who's put in the work in his craft, instead of like maybe skipping steps. Obviously, there's a bunch of different ways to be an artist and be a musician. It's not all just like you have to be technically proficient at every single instrument, but it's really cool when you see somebody who takes the craft of, you know, performance presence, songwriting, and like instrumental virtuosity important. You know, they take that very important. So saw Floyd Fuji, shout out to him. And then we went to New Blue afterwards, which is one of my favorite spots in New York. But yeah, overall a good night. What about yourself?
Yeah, I was at a couple of shows. I don't know if I mentioned on like the last pod or since we last recorded, but I went to see a British band, Shame. And they're like another one of these post-punk bands that I seem to be into at the minute. And they were doing like a co-headline with Viagra Boys.
Oh yeah, the Viagra Boys.
And oh my God, they were so much fun to see. Yeah. Like a lot of fun, and just like one of the bands where I saw them and I was like, oh wow, it's all about the live. Like their live performance is just such a good time, basically.
One person I'd be interested to talk to is like a talent agent, you know, or like a booking agency. Because that's one of those things that you can't really BS in terms of like getting asked to seats. Like they don't really play with their numbers, you know, when in terms of booking tours and like, you know, putting people in shows together and like scheduling lineups in these things, because it has to be based off of, you know, if you have business with these promoters, like you have to, you know, be willing to actually sell tickets and get people in those venues. So I'd be interested to talk to somebody about that, because that's like just a world that I don't know much about.
Yeah, we should definitely get someone on to like demystify.
Yeah, demystify that.
Exactly. That would be great. But anyway, they were amazing. What a show! And I was actually there to see Shame.
Yeah,
but I left thinking I want to go. I mean, and Shame were great, by the way, but I already can't wait to go to another Viagra Boys show. They're just so much fun.
And that's sort of my reason for bringing that up, is because somebody in the back room were like, okay, these two, you know, bands have probably similar fan bases, so they can co-headline this tour, and they're gonna start to exchange, and then they can double dip essentially. Like we're gonna sell double the merch and all these things.
Yeah, totally. So so that was good. And then I was at the Beacon Theatre for Ray LaMontagne, and then I saw my guy, one of my favorite artists at the minute. Shout out to all the Irish artists who are fully representing. Mick Flannery played the Rockwood, and I've seen him like 3 or 4 times now in the past year.
Yeah, and
it didn't disappoint. Like a truly fantastic musician and songwriter.
The Rockwood, tried and true place. I've seen, no exaggeration, hundreds of shows at the Rockwood, and they do a good job about supporting like up and coming musicians. So
totally.
I love going to the Rockwood. It's always a good time. Like going downtown, you always end up getting in trouble somewhere. So
yeah. So good. It's a lot of shows on, and now's the time. Q4.
Yeah, Q4. All right, so diving into our topic of content overload.
Yes. And it's like, this is like, I think it's an interesting one. We're tackling like a tough enough topic this week, but it's topical, like it's been discussed this week in the trade press, and especially for, you know, a lawyer here, there's a lot of numbers been banded about. We generally don't like that as lawyers. We're much more comfortable with the words,
right, than the numbers.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's,
but in general, I think you could say, like, you know, obviously this platform, we try to empower sort of independent artists, and really artists in all stages of their journey. And you can see every year, especially with independent distribution and the way streaming services are set up, artists have sort of more autonomy over their careers and are more empowered to put out music and run their own careers in these things. But there tends to be the sort of constant will to gatekeep. And, you know, for whether that's for good reason or not, we can talk about, but there you can sort of see the back and forth between independent artists and those institutions that have sort of been in power for years and years and years. And, you know, some of these things that are established for good reason. And in the streaming service, independent artists and major record labels have to sort of learn to coexist, or else this back and forth is going to keep going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So, so why don't we? Like, I think you know the point as we relate back to our listeners.
Yeah.
Is, you know, for me that the like one of the whole things to take away from this is that like it can seem so difficult to, you know, make your voice heard, and you know, what chance do you have of having your new release streamed and drawing people's attention to that when it can feel like you're competing against so many other musicians and so many other songs and tracks that are uploaded to whichever, you know, streaming service that we're talking about. But, you know, the stat that was banded about this week, which, you know, you hear, and, you know, you hear all different sorts of numbers, but the number, the figure of new tracks uploaded to Spotify currently is 100,000 tracks a day.
Wow.
So in a week, you're competing, if you've got one track coming out this week, you're competing against 700,000 new tracks that are also being released I use in like sort of air quotes, but uploaded to Spotify, you know, like this week. And like that can seem, I think, it's daunting, and you think, well, actually you might as well just give up, you know, like what's the point? But you know, so that's a stat. But as we see, and we'll like take you through like some like stats here and figures, I think there is like hope, like and you know, light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
You know, and one of the things that like we sort of like frame all of this around is that one of Spotify's ambitions and like mission statements is that they want to create a sustainable platform in Spotify that supports 1 million artists worldwide off the back of Spotify. Right? They've said that publicly, and you know, they're in and out of profitability now at Spotify from like, you know, one quarter to the next over the last few years, and you know, the platform is growing and streaming is growing, etc. But as of today, you know, they're not really close to that. You know, that goal of like supporting 1 million artists in terms of like, you know, what it actually takes to, you know, support and have enough earnings and royalty earnings there that you could actually be deemed to be supporting and actually earning a living there, you know? Right. So
yeah, so in their quest to sort of Spotify's quest to sort of support that many artists, there's a lot of questions in terms of bandwidth and in terms of what the listeners and the subscribers get from these streaming platforms. And those questions are being raised largely by the major music companies, right?
Yeah.
And so that statistic of 100,000 tracks a day was highlighted recently in an earnings call that Universal Music had, a quarterly earnings call. And, you know, a question was asked to Sir Lucian Grainge, the chairman and CEO of Universal Music Group, if he was concerned on the dilution of the streaming services today because of the amount of tracks that they upload.
And it's a fair question because, you know, just to remind everyone of the Spotify streaming model, you know, it's it's like the pool model where all the advertising revenues and subscription revenues go into the pot, and then they are divided up amongst the rights holders based on essentially market share. Like, how many streams like did you get of all the music that was streamed this month? What percentage came from the tracks that are owned by you as that rights holder?
Right.
So, what the journalists are getting at, or the investment analysts are getting at there, is like, if there's 100,000 tracks being uploaded onto Spotify every day, equating to 700,000 a week, how many of those tracks are being uploaded by, well, in this case, it was like Universal, or let's just say the major labels?
Right.
And the answer is like, not very many.
Not very
many at all. Like,
No.
like a tiny fraction
Right.
of that is the reality. So, is this sort of like a concern for the each of the major labels, as every day that goes past, there's more tracks being uploaded, and it essentially serves to dilute their market share or piece of the pie for the streaming revenues that's been earning. So like it's a fair question, and I think honestly it's something that the majors should rightly be concerned about. However, we can have a closer look.
Yeah, I think we can dive into it. So, in the context of that call, he, at the end of the day, Universal and its executives are answerable to their investors, right?
Yeah.
So when asked the question of if you're concerned about the dilution of the streaming services based off of the number of uploads, I feel like naturally you're going to say yes, right? Because your goal is to increase your market share on those streaming platforms with your catalog, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, if it was me, I wouldn't be admitting to being concerned as such but I think he made it.
Yeah, what was his argument?
Yeah, his sort of like take on it was like, well, first of all, he differentiated between quality music, right, and I guess non-quality music. And you would assume that in his eyes, everything Universal releases is quality music. So, he makes the argument that, it's going to be a disaster, for the consumer experience, essentially. And, the more non-quality music we have, sort of like diluting the good stuff released by the likes of Universal, then it's the poorer the consumer experience, and the algorithm is going to be basically skewed to direct people to non-quality music, because most tracks on there will not be Universal releases.
Well, yeah,
etc.
basically, non-quality music is any music that's not uploaded by a major record label.
Yeah, and he, obviously he's talking from a very specific perspective and has an agenda, but where he's going with that argument is like, there needs to be some sort of quality control on what's being uploaded, and
which is valid. Yeah,
I mean, it is and it isn't. I mean, it probably is true for the consumer experience, right? If the more quality, like sheer quality there is on there, the better. But then like, what is quality music? And it becomes very, very subjective. And like, there's a lot of music that I listen to which is not streaming anywhere near as much as a lot of artists signed to major record deals.
Yeah,
I guarantee you it is better quality.
Well, yeah, and but
what's quality?
Exactly. Well,
it's not.
The addition to his argument is he's, and you had mentioned this, is that they're doing a sort of bait and switch where they're saying you can come to our platforms because we have this high level quality of music, but then they're just injecting their platform with a bunch of low quality music as he deems it.
Mm-hmm.
And before we get into the statistics, I feel like we can meander on this a little bit. I kind of see his point if we were talking about, like, let's say like the streaming services for like movies and television shows, right? I could, and it's sort of, you can honestly say it's sort of happened with Netflix, and this is totally anecdotal, just from a user experience. Like, it just seems like for whatever reason, they have different licensing agreements with different studios and whatnot. That it seems like they have a lot of stuff on, like, let's say Netflix, for example, that I've never watched. It's just like either be original content or content that they've uploaded, and it's just like, oh,
yeah.
But so I all that to say is I could understand that argument when it comes to like those type of platforms, but I feel like the way that people consume music is very different than they consume like movies and television shows, right? And I think we've read a statistic on here that, like, for example, catalog performs much better than new music, and that to say that people sort of like what they like when it comes to music. They're obviously interested in discovering new music, but the buy-in is a bit that you have to sell it to them a bit harder, consumers, when it comes to
totally. You have to break that through, and I'm sure the algorithm, it's all based on what's liked, what's added to the playlist, what's shared,
Right.
and like really that's the differentiator of like what's quality. If people are enjoying it, like the proof's in the pudding. It's like you always talk about if something connects,
right?
If a track connects, and like you never know what's going to connect until you actually put it out there. Now, obviously, there's tricks and there's industry connections which give your track the best opportunity of connecting, which a lot of let's say independent artists or let's hobby artists like will not have access to. But nevertheless, there is a point there that the more sort of like genuinely poor quality music on there that there probably is an issue for the consumer experience.
Yeah, but at the same time as well, the reason why that argument is sort of funny to me is because, at least when it comes to on the A&R perspective, a lot of these companies are using like what the streaming performance and like other types of metrics, they're using that to literally scout artists. That when artists are releasing music independently and they're thinking about signing an artist, they're like, oh, okay, what have they done in the past? How is this track performing? And a lot of the times those artists are signing have never signed a major record deal before. They're independent artists releasing music and not through a major label. But then now you're saying, oh, that's good enough for us to sign, but it's not good enough for us to compete with.
Yeah. That's a valid point, and there's all sorts of conundrums there and contradictions, I guess. But let's actually dive into some of the stats. We've got a few interesting statistics at our fingertips, which actually start to as I said, I think there is like a glimmer of hope if you're like an independent artist and you're listening and you're going, oh my God, like 100,000 tracks a day, like that's absolutely crazy.
Right.
However, there is like light at the end of the tunnel, because when you break it down and you look into like, who's in this to be professional and aspire to be professional, it starts to look a little bit different, I guess. So
and I think for us, like our interest in these statistics came from sort of this mentality as well of like the majors being scared to compete with these independent musicians in a catalog, and scared of losing market share. So Jason and I asked the question, where how well are independent artists actually performing on these platforms? And we found some interesting statistics specifically with Spotify. And before we get into them, do you want to list where they're from so people can go check that out?
It was on one of the Music Business Worldwide podcasts, and I listen to that a lot. Sometimes I'll be in the gym or whatever, and I'll stick that on just to keep up to date and informed. And they do a pretty good job of listing out like a lot of stats. They have the R&D department that we don't. The rest don't. But yeah, look, so let's start off like as of today, there are somewhere around 8 million worldwide artists on Spotify, or like artists like across the entire platform of Spotify, And going back to like the goal of Spotify wanting to support 1 million
Right.
like independent
They're pretty
artists.
far off.
Well, there's 8 million on there at the minute, and they reported into via Spotify's own analysis and statistics. They reported that there are only of that 8 million, there are 16,500 artists earning over $50,000 a year.
Wow.
Right. So I mean, it's like it's
it's an inconceivably small percentage.
Yeah, exactly. It's not the like the 1/8 that they're hoping for. If you even determine that $50,000 a year is
livable,
supporting,
especially when you think about, and that's barely making 50,000, and you got to think about how that's broken up to management, bandmates, etc. So that's a pretty wild statistic.
Yeah, and then they were, like the sort of like fascinating thing that they did was like they wanted to take a little bit of a deeper dive to see like, okay, well, like there's 8 million artists, but like a lot can be like, you and I could like record a track here tonight, and then Fairy Tale of New York 2. Maybe, right, and then we could upload that, and then that could be the last one we do, and it's kind of like, well, like how many of these 8 million artists are actually, trying to make a living,
right?
How many and
that are not hobby musicians,
that are not just
hobby,
musicians. They're actually trying to do this for real and like professional or aspiring to be professional, and they were like, well, how do we like break that down? How do we even try to assess that? So they came up with a couple of different parameters. One of which was like, okay, well, look, how many artists on there have released 10 tracks or more? Okay, that was the first one.
Of that 8 million.
Of that 8 million. Of all the artists on our platform, how many have released 10 tracks or more? And the answer was only 1/3. Okay?
Right.
So like 2/3 of the people on Spotify, the artists on Spotify, have not released 10 tracks.
Wow.
Okay. So then they were like, okay, well, of the like the 2.6 million on there that have released 10 tracks or more, how many are kind of, and this I guess is subjective as well, but like how many have like a bit of a following? We'll call it like 10,000 monthly listeners,
right?
And that figure fell dramatically to 165,000. Wow. So they basically said, right, of the 8 million artists that are on there, there's only 165,000 that have released 10 tracks or more and have 10,000 monthly listeners. So right away, it kind of like falls down to like a much smaller percentage.
And that was sort of answering their first two questions about how did you actually define a professional musician or an aspiring professional musician.
That was one way they looked at it, and then they were kind of like, well, that's all a bit arbitrary. Let's like try to get another sort of like data point, and they decided like a good way would be to actually look at, well, how many artists are out there like selling tickets for shows in like a meaningful way,
right?
And they looked at, I think, like Songkick, Ticketmaster, and then some other platforms, and they figured that there was somewhere just under 200,000 like artists who'd sold tickets to shows. And by the way, that stat was importantly like pre-pandemic, like 2019,
right?
When shows were sort of like fully up and running. So they basically, there's somewhere in the range of 200,000 artists on the Spotify platform that they are deeming professional or aspiring to be professional.
Yeah, and I think I'm actually not upset with the metrics that they're using to determine that, but I think it's important to point out that there are exceptions to that, right?
Yeah.
And something that I had talked about in our pre-production is like, okay, you could have like a Lil Nas X who, puts a song out, Old Town Road, and that one song alone, even before it gets signed to a major, is going to be able to generate $50,000 or more, Yeah. So, but you might argue, okay, well, he didn't put out 10 tracks, he hasn't sold a ticket yet, and in fact, there are a lot of artists who get discovered who haven't put out 10 tracks, who haven't even sold a show, right? Or ticket to a show.
Yeah, that's true.
But when you're talking about like, I guess people who are taking their career seriously and are actively trying to become artists, there's at least on the Spotify platform around 200,000.
Which I just did the maths there. I wasn't being rude while you were talking there. I just did the maths, and that's like 2.5%.
Wow.
Of the total like artists. Or another way of like framing that is 97.5% of the artists on Spotify are not deemed professional or even, trying to be professional. And that to me is like the takeaway, the hope that I was talking about.
Yeah.
Right? If you're actually out there and you're doing it and you're like releasing tracks and you're on the channel, really what you got to do is have more than 10 tracks, more than 10,000 or 10,000 or more monthly listeners, and you're already
ahead of 2/3.
Oh no, 97.5% of the competition in Spotify's eyes. You're deemed, well ahead of the curve. So I think it's just like that's a message of hope. Like, they don't get too dejected by like just the sheer number of tracks, because a lot of these people are just like, it's just hobbyists and they're not going to be in it for the duration.
And actually I like the fact that you said that, because I do think for independent artists it's good to have specific goals, right? If you can say, okay, like what can I say I'm doing to strike off like, okay, I'm in the right path. Okay, I'm going to be consistent and at least put out 10 songs or an album or whatever, however you get to that. And I'm going to try to get at least 10,000 monthly Spotify listeners. And based off of these statistics, like you were saying, you're already ahead of the curve, right?
Yeah, totally. I feel like, so look, like, I think
sell a ticket.
Sell a ticket. Yeah. Get out there, sell a ticket and do shows. Like, that is the way. So
when you look at these statistics and you see basically the amount of artists on Spotify and the amount of artists on Spotify that are actually deemed professional or doing something, when you compare that to the sort of major labels' concern about the dilution of music on these streaming services, do you think that concern holds any weight to how music is performing in reality?
Well, I mean, it would, based on those stats that we've currently gone through, it would tell you that, the people who are actually earning the money and, generating, like, well, we the threshold we talked about there was like $50,000 per year. Like, that is still confined to a very, very small percentage of the total artists on Spotify. So, it's not like the majors are going to be going out of business anytime soon, like from streaming. But that said, it is true that the sort of overall percentage of the pie that independent artists are taking is from streaming services is increasing every year. And what you forget, or what you must remember, of course, is that like with these major labels, they're publicly traded companies, and they have to be seen to be growing each year and getting more profitable each year, ideally. And it is a legitimate concern. Like, we're talking, like, it all adds up, basically. And but I think obviously Sir Lucian Grainge is talking from a perspective, and he has the custodian of universal music, but so he has to say what he's saying, and there's and he may well have a point, but I think it's like, look, what is quality music? And like, it comes back to that, and and of course there are probably some sort of arbitrary parameters we could come up with here to find, like, truly what is sort of passes the test and what doesn't. And from a consumer experience, it is important that like the algorithm is directing you to quality music or good music, but like
which is just what music that you like.
Exactly,
really.
That's the point. It's like it's so subjective, and it's like it's not for any record label, major or otherwise, to sort of determine what is good music.
But I think from an operational standpoint, the majors maybe have a point when it comes to the sustainability of the streaming services, right? Like,
yeah,
based off of things we've talked about on this podcast and what's going on in the world, it's, they're not only struggling with increased costs due to increased bandwidth and like the more music that they're ingesting in the platform, they're also dealing with, demands for increased royalty rates from all sides, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they're constantly, fighting with the copyright board or with the songwriters, and constantly in negotiation with the major labels. And on top of that, I know you had said that they're paying more money for their actual like computing.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things that they were pointing out is like, if there's 100,000 tracks being ingested a day, this year, what's that going to be next year? What's going to be the following year? Like that could just keep on growing as a platform grows. And there are huge cloud computing bills associated with like storing all of this like data essentially. And there was a little exercise I think I saw that like this year alone, it was estimated that Spotify will have spent to date 130 million euros solely on like cloud computing fees and costs, I should say. So look, they're in and out of profit at the minute, and like all these sort of like operational costs that like any business needs to seeks to reduce.
Mm-hmm.
And like that's a real cost, and maybe it is something that they'll have to address in the future. Is there going to be some form of quality control on there? We shall see. I mean, you could have a good debate as whether that would be a good thing or a bad thing. Like there's I'd say some parameter probably, or like bench entry point might be a decent
some like
thing,
tiered service where if you pay a little extra to get music that is distributed by like the major labels or whatever it is. Which hopefully not. I think that would be a terrible business model.
I wouldn't like that. But I'm more talking about like let's say isn't it Apple that have that for apps onto the App Store?
Mm-hmm.
Right, like unlike Android, you can basically like make an app and put it up there, and anyone can download it. But like Apple have like a certain quality control of the actual apps that they'll accept onto the Apple Store. So that would be something I'm put in mind. But then how do you quality control 100,000 or more tracks a day? I mean, there'd have to be some sort of. I mean, that's wrecking my head even thinking about it.
I think there are people who make way more than us that are probably dealing with that question right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously not going to be. It would have to be AI or or certain entry level parameters.
Maybe Elon should buy Spotify next. Maybe.
No, I don't think that'll be a popular move.
No. But we're mentioning Spotify statistics right now, and obviously there are other streaming services. But I think what I see in this is like Spotify. Their whole business model, with the exception of podcasts and these things, is the streaming of music. And so they're sort of the ones that have to tackle these big issues when it comes to like quality control, and sort of are industry leaders in that, because everyone else is going to be looking at them to see like how they handle the issue. Because at the end of the day, if you look at a platform like Apple Music or Amazon Music, they are making significant amount of revenues in other areas. Like if Amazon Music went away tomorrow, 100% Amazon would feel that, but they're still going to be selling you, everything.
Yeah.
Same thing. There's Apple selling, watches and phones and things. I mean, maybe, for music, Apple, that sort of revolutionized their business as well. But all that to say, they will still be around. Whereas if Spotify doesn't handle maybe their bandwidth issue or resolve all these issues when it comes to like royalty rates and these things, they could not exist anymore.
But it's their only it's their raison d'etre
Yeah.
right now, and of course they're looking to get into podcasting.
Right.
Shout out to Spotify if you're looking to up another podcast.
Oh,
we're all ears.
Yeah.
But look, that's much more profitable for
We
them.
love Spotify. It's
Exactly.
great.
Yeah. There's no problems.
Yeah.
But look, that it is actually worth saying. Like, a lot of this stuff they're figuring out just because of how hugely popular it is, and the it will evolve, no doubt, as the platform. It's like a living, breathing platform, and things change. And I think they do a really good job of adding more value to the platform for the consumer. You know, so it's like, like it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. But look, it was an interesting debate that was going on in the press, or a point that was raised, and like it occurred to me that, like, Jesus, it must be very disheartening if you're an independent artist trying to compete with all those releases. But like, we already broke it down as to sort of the light at the end of the tunnel. It's like 97.5% of the artists on there are not, like, deemed by Spotify as professional or aspiring to be professional. So it's the competition's not as steep as the stat would initially indicate. Right.
Mm-hmm. And just be consistent. I think that's like a big takeaway here. Is just be consistent.
Yeah. There's a path. There's a path for if this is what you want to do and this is your calling and your passion, etc. You just have to stick at it, and you have to realize that there are people succeed in this industry. Like you can make your music heard. You can establish yourself as a career. Like, not everyone's going to be a Taylor Swift,
right?
And shout out to Taylor for getting all top 10 spots on the Billboard chart.
That is an accomplishment.
First ever, yeah.
And it's just that, and we were talking about this a little before too, but that level of performance sort of puts things in perspective in terms of like who the top dogs are in the music industry. Whether you like really listen to Taylor Swift or not, it's a bit undeniable what artists like that can do in their first week and how they can actually perform on the charts.
And there you are, like the power of the major labels, So but yeah, look, I thought that was like worth talking about, and some of the stats there were interesting. You do a deep dive, and look, just stay consistent, keep going, and there's a path for you. And that show I was at on Sunday night, I think is a perfect example. Like, Mick is just like, I don't know what number of album he's on now, like 7 or 8 or whatever, like that. And it's just like, you got to stay passionate about what you're doing, stay true, stay authentic, and you can have a career and travel the world, playing your art and finding those fans who also dig your vibe and believe in your music.
Definitely. Mm-hmm. Well said.
Well, that's a nice little one to finish it on. Shall we wrap it up and let people know where they can where they can find us?
Thanks again for listening. We are the Record Shepherds. You can listen to us where all podcasts are streamed. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, you can email us at therecordshepherds@gmail.com, and also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. And then if you'd like to be on our show, please hit us up. If you have an interesting topic, conversation you want us to hit us up. Like, comment, subscribe, and keep staying tuned.
Yeah, maybe we'll get a promoter on to talk us a little bit about their gig and
definitely
demystify that. That would be cool.
Yeah.
And if you're in the New York area, just drop us a line at the Gmail account, therecordshepherds@gmail.com, if you'd like to come join us on the sofa and you got any conversations that would be fun to talk about, then we're all ears. We'd love to hear from you. So just get in touch. So that leaves it for me to say, until the next exciting episode, continue to follow the guidance of the Record Shepherds.
Don't be the sheep,
be the goat. Happy Halloween.